The morning sun cast long shadows across the Galactic Military Academy as cadets from 30 different worlds hurried to their first class. Among them walked Hannah, a 19-year-old human girl with short black hair and quiet brown eyes. She carried her books close to her chest and kept her head down as she entered the theoretical warfare classroom. The classroom buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages. Tall blue-skinned Altarians discussed battle formations, while insect-like Morden clicked their mandibles in agreement about supply chain logistics. The reptilian Vextai hissed softly as they debated weapon effectiveness. At the back of the room, Hannah slipped into an empty seat and opened her notebook. Professor Keltar, a veteran Altarian with battle scars across his blue face, began the lesson. Today we study the Battle of Rigel 7. Who can tell me why the Federation forces failed against the Vextai Empire? Hands shot up around the room. Vextai cadets smirked as they prepared to boast about their ancestors' victory. Morden students raised their clawed appendages with analytical precision. Even some human cadets eagerly waved their arms. Hannah kept her hands folded on her desk. Her eyes followed the discussion, but she never spoke. When Professor Keltar asked direct questions about tactical formations, she looked down at her notes. When he requested volunteers to explain battle strategies, she remained silent. "Miss Lee," Professor Keltar called out, his voice carrying across the room. "Perhaps you have thoughts on why the human fleet commanders made such poor decisions at Rigel 7. The classroom fell quiet. 30 pairs of alien eyes turned to stare at the small human girl in the back row. Hannah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she shook her head slightly. "I do not know, sir," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. A few Vextai cadets made low hissing sounds that might have been laughter. Professor Keltar sighed and moved on to the next topic. Hannah sank lower in her seat. This pattern continued through advanced strategy and interstellar logistics. In every class, Hannah remained quiet while other students debated and discussed. Her human classmate Choi-won often glanced back at her with embarrassment. He had worked hard to gain respect from alien cadets, and Hannah's silence made humans look unprepared. But everything changed when the afternoon combat simulation began. The training facility contained holographic environments that could recreate any battlefield condition. Today's exercise was simple weapon familiarization. Cadets would handle energy rifles from 5 different species and demonstrate basic shooting techniques. Instructor Park Da, a sturdy human with graying hair, distributed the weapons. Remember, each species designs weapons differently. Altarian rifles use crystal focusing. Vextai weapons rely on plasma compression. Morden guns fire projectiles at incredible velocity. Take your time to understand each system. The Vextai cadets grabbed their species weapons first, handling them with natural ease. Their shots hit the targets with deadly precision. The Altarians performed well with their crystal rifles, though they struggled with other designs. Morden students adapted quickly to most weapons, but had trouble with energy-based systems. When Hannah's turn came, something remarkable happened. She picked up the Vextai plasma rifle first. Within seconds, she had located the power cell, identified the targeting system, and understood the firing mechanism. Her first shot struck the target dead center. Her second shot hit the same spot. Her third shot went through the exact same hole. Park Day raised his eyebrows but said nothing. Hannah moved to the Altarian crystal rifle. The weapon required precise hand positioning to focus the energy beam properly. Most non-Altarian cadets needed several minutes to figure out the correct grip. Hannah held it for 10 seconds, adjusted her stance, and began firing. Every shot found its mark. By the time she reached the Morden projectile weapon, other cadets had stopped their own practice to watch. The Morden gun required complex calculations to account for projectile drop and wind resistance. Hannah aimed for 3 seconds and fired. The target's center exploded. The training facility fell completely silent. Professor Keltar, who had come to observe the combat training, stood with his mouth open. The Vextai cadets, who had been hissing with amusement all morning, now watched with narrow, calculating eyes. Hana quietly placed the weapons back on their racks and returned to her position. She did not smile or acknowledge the stares. She simply waited for the next instruction, as if nothing unusual had happened. Park Dae cleared his throat. Excellent work, everyone. Same time tomorrow. As cadets filed out of the facility, whispers followed in multiple languages. The quiet human girl who never spoke in class had just demonstrated weapon mastery that surpassed students who had trained with their species' weapons since childhood. Hana walked back to her dormitory alone, unaware that her performance had been recorded by Academy surveillance systems. In his office, Commander Yule reviewed the footage with interest. He made a note in her file and marked it for special attention. The silent storm was beginning to gather strength. 3 weeks had passed since the weapons demonstration, but Hana continued her pattern of silence in academic classes. She sat in the back row during Galactic history, never raising her hand when Professor Zenth asked about famous battles. During strategic planning lessons, she took notes quietly while other cadets debated invasion tactics and defensive formations. The only person who seemed to notice her combat skills was Kim Bora, a cheerful human girl who specialized in technology systems. Bora had watched Hana's weapon performance and decided to introduce herself during lunch. "You made those plasma rifles look like toys," Bora said, sitting down across from Hana in the mostly empty human section of the cafeteria. "I work with tech systems all day and I have never seen anyone adapt that fast." Hana looked up from her meal, surprised that someone wanted to talk to her. "The weapons have logical designs. You just need to understand the purpose behind each part." "Logical designs," Bora laughed. "Tell that to the Vextai cadets who spent 2 hours yesterday trying to figure out an Altarian crystal rifle." Across the cafeteria, a group of Vextai students sat at their usual table. Their scaled green skin gleamed under the lights as they discussed something in their hissing language. One of them, a tall cadet named Vextai, glanced toward the human section with obvious disdain. "They think humans are weak," Bora said, following Hana's gaze. "Most of our classmates try so hard to prove them wrong that they make mistakes, but you just do your job and let the results speak." At another table, Choi Won sat with a mixed group of alien cadets. He laughed loudly at their jokes and agreed enthusiastically with their opinions about human military history. When he noticed Hana watching, he frowned and turned away. "One thinks you make humans look bad," Bora continued. He told everyone that humans need to participate more in class discussions to earn respect. Hana returned to her food. Talking does not win battles. The next morning brought exciting news. Commander Yule entered the main assembly hall where all cadets gathered for daily announcements. His stern face carried a hint of excitement as he approached the podium. "Cadets, I am pleased to announce this year's Galactic Defense Tournament," he began. The hall erupted in whispers and excited chatter. Teams of 2 will compete in combat scenarios, tactical challenges, and survival exercises. The winning team will receive immediate placement in elite military units currently deployed at the galactic frontier. The mention of elite units caused a stir among the cadets. Everyone knew that the most prestigious assignments went to graduates who proved themselves exceptional. Most cadets would spend years in regular military service before earning such opportunities. "Team selection begins tomorrow," Commander Yule continued. "Choose your partners wisely. The tournament will test every skill you have learned at this academy." As cadets filed out of the assembly hall, the cafeteria buzzed with partnership negotiations. Vextai students formed pairs within their own species, confident in their natural combat abilities. Altarian cadets sought partners with complementary skills. Morden students analyzed potential combinations with mathematical precision. In the human section, Choi Won approached a group of respected alien cadets. "I would be honored to partner with any of you," he said eagerly. "Humans bring unique perspectives to tactical situations." A Vextai cadet named Sekthar looked him up and down. "Humans are adequate support troops, but this tournament requires fighters." One's face reddened, but he forced a smile. "I scored highest among humans in combat simulations." "Second highest," Bora corrected quietly from nearby. She had been checking academy records on her datapad. Hannah scored higher in every combat exercise. Several alien cadets turned to look at Hannah, who was gathering her books to leave. Most had never paid attention to her before. The quiet one, Vextai, hissed with amusement. She cannot even speak in class. How would she communicate during battle? Maybe she communicates with her weapons, Bora replied, standing up to face the larger reptilian cadet. Want to test that theory? The tension in the room grew thick. Vextai's scales rippled with aggression, while other Vextai cadets moved to flank him. Altarian students watched with interest, always curious about potential conflicts. Hannah walked calmly between Bora and Vextai. She looked up at the towering reptilian cadet without fear or anger, just quiet assessment. If you wish to test theories, she said in her soft voice, the tournament will provide opportunities. Vextai stared down at her, expecting intimidation or submission. Instead, he found steady brown eyes that seemed to catalog his every movement and weakness. Something in her calm confidence made him step back slightly. We shall see, little human, he said finally. As the crowd dispersed, Bora caught up with Hannah in the corridor. So, want to be partners for the tournament? Hannah considered the offer. She had planned to compete alone, but Bora's technical skills could prove useful. More importantly, the girl had shown loyalty by defending her. Yes, Hannah said simply. Great, Bora grinned. Fair warning though, nobody is going to pick us. They all think humans are the weak link in any partnership. Good, Hannah replied. Underestimation is often a tactical advantage. That evening, partnership lists were posted throughout the academy. Most teams consisted of cadets from the same species or prestigious mixed combinations of respected fighters. Near the bottom of the list, one entry caught attention. Team designation Human Tech. Members Lihana and Kim Bora. Several cadets pointed and whispered. The quiet girl who never spoke and the tech specialist who spent more time with computers than weapons. It seemed like the weakest team in tournament history. In his office, Commander Yule reviewed the team listings with Instructor Park Da. Interesting choice, Yule commented, noting Hannah's name. She might surprise people, Park replied carefully. Yes, Yule agreed, remembering the weapon demonstration footage. She might indeed. The Galactic Defense Tournament opened with ceremonies that filled the Academy's massive central arena. Holographic banners displayed the symbols of 30 different worlds, while delegates from each species watched from elevated platforms. The arena floor had been transformed into a shimmering battlefield, where light and shadow danced across adaptive terrain systems. Commander Yule stood at the center podium, his voice carrying across the packed stadium. Today, 64 teams will begin competition for the ultimate prize. The winners will join elite units defending our galaxy's frontier against unknown threats. In the preparation area beneath the arena, teams made final equipment checks. Vextai pairs sharpened their natural claws and tested plasma weapons. Altarian duos calibrated their crystal focusing devices. Morton teams synchronized their communication frequencies with mathematical precision. At a quiet corner table, Hannah and Bora reviewed their strategy one final time. Bora had loaded her portable computer with technical specifications for every weapon and defense system they might encounter. Hannah sat calmly, her eyes closed as she visualized different combat scenarios. First match is against Vextai and Sekthar, Bora said, checking the tournament bracket on her screen. They have trained together since childhood. Both are expert fighters with traditional Vextai combat techniques. Hannah opened her eyes. What techniques do they prefer? Aggressive frontal assault with plasma weapons, followed by close combat using claws and physical strength. They rely on intimidation and overwhelming force. Bora pulled up video footage from their training sessions. Look at this. They never retreat, never use cover, never change tactics mid-fight. Predictable, Hannah observed quietly. Nearby, Choi-Won sat with his Altarian partner, a tall blue-skinned cadet named Felrin. One kept glancing toward Hannah's table with obvious concern. "I still think she will embarrass our species," one muttered. "She has never shown leadership or communication skills. How can she coordinate with a partner?" Felron adjusted his crystal focusing gloves. "Perhaps you worry too much about what others think of humans instead of focusing on your own performance." The first round announcement echoed through the preparation area. Teams began moving toward arena entrances as holographic displays showed the opening matchup. The crowd above roared with excitement as the arena transformed into a rocky canyon battlefield, complete with narrow passages and elevated platforms. Vextai and Sekthar entered from the eastern gate, their green scales gleaming under arena lights. They moved with confident, predatory grace, while raising their weapons to acknowledge the cheering Vextai delegation. Both reptilian warriors stood nearly 7 feet tall with muscled frames that spoke of years of combat training. From the western gate, Hana and Bora walked onto the battlefield. The contrast was dramatic. Hana appeared tiny next to the towering Vextai fighters, her simple academy uniform making her look more like a student than a warrior. Bora carried her technical equipment in a compact backpack while scanning the terrain with analytical eyes. The crowd fell silent. Even the enthusiastic human delegation seemed uncertain as they watched their representatives face opponents who looked capable of ending the match in seconds. "This seems unfair," commented an Altarian observer in the VIP section. "Perhaps," replied a Mordan delegate, clicking his mandibles thoughtfully. "But sometimes appearances deceive." Arena announcer Kelleron activated his amplification system. First round, Canyon combat scenario. Teams must reach the objective point at the canyon center while eliminating opposing forces. Standard tournament rules apply. No killing, but knockout weapons are authorized. Begin combat in 3, 2, 1. The arena erupted in motion. Vextai and Sekthar immediately charged forward, plasma rifles blazing as they fired at Hana's last known position. Their shots struck rock walls and sent fragments flying, but their targets had vanished. "Where did they go?" Sekthar hissed, scanning the canyon with narrowed eyes. Above them, Hana clung to a rocky ledge that should have been impossible to reach so quickly. She had used a combination of momentum and precise handholds to scale the wall in seconds, while Bora established position behind a protective boulder. The Vextai warriors continued their frontal assault, moving through the canyon's center exactly as their training had taught them. They were powerful, skilled, and completely focused on overwhelming their opponents through superior firepower. They never looked up. Hana dropped silently behind Sekthar, her academy training sword pressed against his neck before he could react. The weapon's knockout charge activated, sending the reptilian warrior into unconsciousness. Vextai spun around in shock, but Bora had already calculated his position. A concentrated sonic pulse from her technical equipment disrupted his balance while Hana rolled forward, her sword finding its mark with surgical precision. The entire engagement lasted 43 seconds. The arena fell completely silent. 60,000 spectators stared at the battlefield where 2 small humans stood over their defeated opponents. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence stretched until it became almost painful. Then the human delegation erupted in cheers. "Incredible," breathed Kelleron over the arena speakers. "In my 20 years of tournament commentary, I have never seen such a complete tactical victory." In the VIP section, military commanders leaned forward with intense interest. Captain Na, a veteran fleet officer, activated her recording system to analyze the match footage. "Who trained her?" asked General Torgan, a respected Altarian strategist. "Academy records show standard human military education," replied his aide. "Nothing exceptional in her academic files." "Then she is either hiding her true background," Torgan mused, "or she possesses natural tactical abilities that surpass formal training." Down in the arena, Hana helped both unconscious Vextai warriors to their feet as medical teams arrived. She showed them the same quiet respect she offered everyone, checking to ensure neither had suffered injury during their fall. Vextai looked down at her with confusion and something approaching respect. "How did you move so quickly? How did you know we would charge forward?" You fought exactly as you trained, Hannah replied simply. Your techniques were perfect for your species' traditional combat style. But not perfect for this situation, Sekthar added, understanding beginning to dawn. No, Hannah agreed, not for this situation. As the teams left the arena, whispers followed in dozens of languages. The quiet human girl had just achieved something unprecedented. She had defeated experienced Vextai warriors without taking a single hit, without firing a single shot, and without speaking a single command to her partner. In the preparation area, other teams watched with new awareness as Hannah and Bora returned to their corner table. The tournament had 63 matches remaining, but everyone understood that something fundamental had changed. The silent storm was no longer gathering. It had arrived. News of Hannah's victory spread through the academy faster than hyperspace communications. By the next morning, cadets from every species gathered around holographic displays to watch replay footage of the 43-second battle. The quiet human girl had become the most discussed topic in 30 different languages. In the Academy's Tactical Analysis Center, Professor Keltar studied the combat footage with several colleagues. They ran the video in slow motion, analyzing every movement and decision. Look at this moment, Keltar said, pausing the display. She evaluates the terrain, assesses enemy movement patterns, and formulates a complete battle plan in under 5 seconds. Our advanced tactical computers require longer processing time for similar calculations. But she had no formal advanced training, replied Professor Zenth, reviewing Hannah's academic records. Her classroom performance indicates average theoretical knowledge at best. Perhaps, suggested Dr. Mortek, a Morden psychology specialist, she processes tactical information differently than traditional military education assumes. Some minds work better with practical application than theoretical study. Meanwhile, in the tournament preparation areas, teams scrambled to develop new strategies. The second round would begin in 2 days, and everyone understood that conventional approaches might not succeed against unconventional opponents. Boris sat at her workstation, analyzing footage of their upcoming opponents, while Hannah practiced weapon forms in the corner. Their next match would be against a team of Altarian twin fighters known for perfect synchronization and crystal energy techniques. Kelvin and Melvin have fought together since birth, Bora explained, pulling up their training records. They communicate through some kind of mental link that lets them coordinate attacks with impossible precision. Watch this. The video showed the Altarian twins moving in perfect harmony, their crystal weapons creating overlapping energy fields that trapped opponents in geometric patterns of light. No team had ever broken their synchronized defensive formations. Interesting, Hannah said quietly, studying their movements. They rely completely on each other. That is their strength, Bora replied. Perfect teamwork. It is also their weakness. Across the preparation area, other teams watched Hannah with mixtures of curiosity and concern. The Vextai delegation had demanded detailed reviews of her fighting techniques. Morden teams calculated probability matrices for various scenarios. Even human cadets studied her methods, hoping to understand what made her different. Koi-Wan approached their table with obvious reluctance. His Altarian partner, Felrun, had convinced him to seek advice after watching the canyon battle footage. Hannah, one said awkwardly, I wanted to ask about your combat approach. How do you make decisions so quickly in battle situations? Hannah looked up from her weapon maintenance. What do you mean? In class, you never participate in tactical discussions, but in combat, you seem to know exactly what to do instantly. How do you analyze situations so fast? I do not analyze, Hannah replied simply. I observe and respond. One frowned. But tactical planning requires analysis. You need to consider multiple variables, calculate probabilities, evaluate options. By the time you finish calculating, the situation has changed, Hannah said, returning to her equipment. Combat is not a mathematics problem. Then what is it? Hannah paused in her work, considering the question seriously. Combat is conversation. Your opponent tells you their intentions through movement, positioning, weapon selection. You respond with your own message. The first person to understand the conversation wins. One stared at her, trying to process this philosophy that contradicted everything taught in academy strategy classes. Felrin nodded thoughtfully, his blue features showing interest. So you read your opponents like a language? Felrin said. Yes, every fighter speaks differently. Vextai speak with aggression and power. Altarians speak with precision and coordination. Mordans speak with logic and efficiency. You must learn their language to respond correctly. The second round arrived with even larger crowds than the opening matches. Word had spread beyond the academy to military commands throughout the galaxy. Senior officers watched through secure communication links while cadets packed every available viewing space. The arena transformed into an urban combat zone with narrow streets, multi-level buildings, and civilians that teams needed to protect while engaging enemies. Hana and Bora faced the Altarian twins in a scenario designed to test coordination under complex conditions. Kelvin and Melvin entered the arena with characteristic Altarian grace, their crystal weapons gleaming as they established immediate defensive positions. Their synchronized movements created overlapping fields of energy that seemed impossible to penetrate. Hana studied their formation for exactly 3 seconds, then whispered something to Bora. Her partner nodded and began setting up technical equipment while Hana disappeared into the urban maze. The twins maintained perfect defensive coordination, their energy fields covering every approach angle as they advanced toward the objective point. Their mental link allowed instantaneous communication and response to any threat. What they did not expect was for the threat to come from inside their own formation. Hana had used the urban environment's reflective surfaces to redirect one of their own crystal energy beams. The redirected beam struck Melvin from behind, disrupting his concentration and breaking the mental link that powered their synchronized defense. For the first time in their fighting careers, the twins were forced to operate independently. Kelvin, suddenly alone in his mind, hesitated for a crucial moment. That hesitation was all Hana needed. She emerged from cover behind him, her training sword finding its mark with the same surgical precision she had shown against the Vextai warriors. As Kelvin fell unconscious, Melvin found himself facing both human opponents alone. The match ended in 57 seconds. The crowd's reaction was even stronger than before. Military observers leaned forward in their seats, taking notes and asking questions. In the Academy's command center, communication screens lit up with requests for information about the human cadet, who had now defeated 2 supposedly superior teams using completely unconventional methods. Captain Ney activated her private communication channel to contact Fleet Command. Sir, I need to speak with you about a cadet at the Academy. Her name is Hana, and I believe she represents something we have never seen before. What kind of something? Came the reply. The kind that might change how we think about warfare itself. In the preparation area, teams that had dismissed the human partnership now studied them with serious attention. The tournament bracket showed Hana and Borat advancing to the quarterfinals, where they would face increasingly skilled opponents. But as word of her victories spread, reports began arriving from the galactic frontier. Military units were encountering an enemy that seemed to anticipate every standard tactical response. Traditional strategies were failing against opponents who learned and adapted faster than military commanders could change their approaches. Unknown to the tournament participants, decisions made in distant command centers were already connecting Hana's unconventional success to the mysterious failures at the frontier. The silent storm was growing stronger, and the galaxy was beginning to take notice. The tournament's semifinals brought unprecedented attention to the Academy. Military leaders from across the galaxy watched through secure channels, while news broadcasts carried updates to dozens of worlds. The quiet human girl who had defeated every opponent without taking damage was now considered the most interesting development in military tactics for decades. Hana sat in the preparation area, cleaning her equipment with the same calm focus she brought to every task. Around her, the atmosphere buzzed with tension as remaining teams made final preparations. Only 4 teams remained from the original 64, and each had proven themselves exceptional fighters. Bora reviewed their opponent data with growing concern. We faced Choi 1 and Felleron in 30 minutes. One has been studying all our previous matches. He thinks he understands your fighting style now. What does he think he understands? Hana asked without looking up from her weapon maintenance. He believes you use environmental advantages and opponent psychology to win fights before they begin. His strategy is to force direct confrontation in an arena with minimal cover and maximum visibility. Hana nodded slightly. A logical approach. Will it work? No. Across the preparation area, one paced nervously, while his Altarian partner meditated in traditional crystal focusing exercises. One had spent days analyzing footage of Hana's victories, searching for patterns and weaknesses in her seemingly perfect record. She relies on surprise and misdirection. One explained to Felleron for the 100th time. If we force her into direct combat with no hiding places, her advantages disappear. Humans are physically weaker than most species. Without tricks and terrain, she cannot win. Felleron opened his blue eyes. You speak as though she is your enemy rather than your fellow human. She makes humans look weak by refusing to engage properly in combat, one replied. Real warriors face their opponents directly with strength and skill, not hiding and ambush tactics. Interesting, Felleron said thoughtfully. I wonder if that is what the Vextai twins thought before she defeated them. The arena transformed into exactly what one had requested. A large circular platform with perfect lighting, minimal obstacles, and nowhere to hide. 2 teams would enter from opposite sides and engage in direct combat until one side achieved victory. No environmental advantages, no surprise attacks, no unconventional tactics. The crowd roared as teams entered the arena. One and Felleron moved with confident determination, their weapons ready for the straightforward battle they had planned. One carried a standard human assault rifle, while Felleron bore traditional Altarian crystal weapons. Hana and Bora entered from the opposite side, appearing calm and unhurried, despite facing their most challenging opponents yet. Bora carried her technical equipment, while Hana bore simple academy training weapons that seemed inadequate compared to their opponents' advanced gear. Arena announcer Felleron activated his system. Semifinal match. Direct combat scenario. Teams will engage on an open platform with victory determined by eliminating opposing forces. No retreating beyond arena boundaries. Begin combat in 3, 2, 1. One immediately raised his rifle and began firing, expecting Hana to seek cover that did not exist. Felleron supported with precisely aimed crystal energy beams that covered every possible escape route. But Hana did not try to escape. Instead, she walked directly toward them. One's shots missed by centimeters as Hana moved with fluid grace, each step perfectly timed to avoid his targeting solutions. She seemed to predict where he would aim before he decided to fire. Felleron's energy beams carved through empty air as she flowed around them like water around stones. Impossible, one muttered, adjusting his aim frantically. She should not be able to dodge in open terrain. Hana continued her approach, never changing direction abruptly or moving faster than seemed necessary. She simply walked forward as if the weapon's fire posed no threat at all. Felleron recognized what was happening first. She is reading our intentions through our body language. She knows where we will aim before we fire. That cannot work, one insisted, switching to full automatic fire. No one can predict that accurately. Hana reached conversational distance and stopped. One's rifle clicked empty. Felleron's crystal weapon powered down as its energy cell drained. Both opponents stared at her in shock, realizing they had exhausted their ammunition without landing a single hit. You fought exactly as you planned, Hana said quietly. Direct engagement, maximum firepower, overwhelming force. But it should have worked, one protested. You had nowhere to hide. I did not hide. Then how did you dodge everything? Hana looked at him with something approaching sadness. I did not dodge. You missed. That is impossible. No, Hannah replied. It is inevitable. You tried to force me to fight like you instead of fighting like me. She gestured to Bora, who activated a sonic pulse that knocked both opponents unconscious before they could respond. The match lasted 2 minutes and 37 seconds. The arena fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Spectators were not shocked by another impossible victory. They were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something beyond conventional military thinking. In the VIP section, Captain May leaned forward with intense focus. She did not use superior speed or reflexes, she said to her aide. She used superior understanding. Understanding of what, sir? Of how her opponents think. She fought their minds, not their bodies. After the match, one sat in the medical bay with a splitting headache from the sonic pulse. When Hannah came to check on him, he looked up with confusion and frustration. I do not understand, he said. Everything I learned about tactics and strategy should have given us the advantage. How did you know where we would aim? Hannah sat down beside him. In class, they teach you to fight like everyone else. They give you standard tactics, approved strategies, conventional approaches. Yes, proven methods that work. They work against opponents who use the same methods, Hannah agreed. But what happens when you face someone who does not follow the same rules? One frowned. You cheat. No, Hannah said gently. I fight like myself instead of fighting like my teachers. But that makes no sense. Military doctrine exists because it works. Military doctrine exists because it worked against previous enemies, Hannah corrected. What if you face an enemy that has studied your doctrine and learned to counter it? Something in her tone made one look at her more carefully. You know something about the frontier situation. I know that conventional tactics are failing against an unknown enemy, Hannah replied. I know that every standard strategy has been tried and defeated. I know that military commanders are desperate for new approaches. How do you know that? Because they are watching this tournament with great interest, Hannah said, glancing toward the VIP section where military officials took notes and sent urgent communications. They are not looking for the strongest fighters. They are looking for different thinkers. One followed her gaze and saw the intense attention focused on their conversation. They want you. They want someone who can win against opponents that have learned to beat traditional military thinking. And you think you can do that? Hannah stood up to leave. I think that in combat, you fight like yourself instead of fighting like your teachers. As she walked away, one finally understood what she had been trying to tell them. The quiet girl who never raised her hand in class had been learning something entirely different from everyone else. She had been learning to think for herself. Part 6, Finals and First Contact. The tournament finals arrived with galactic attention unlike anything the Academy had ever experienced. Representatives from every major military command watched through encrypted channels while civilian populations followed news updates across 30 worlds. The small human cadet who had redefined combat tactics was now the most watched individual in known space. The arena had been transformed into its most complex configuration yet. Multiple levels, shifting platforms, environmental hazards, and holographic obstacles created a three-dimensional battlefield that would test every skill the competitors had learned. This was not just combat, it was warfare in its purest form. Hannah sat quietly in the preparation chamber, her equipment laid out with characteristic precision. Bora worked at her computer station, analyzing their opponents with growing respect and concern. Corden and Velnash, Bora said, displaying the final team's information. Morden high fighters with 15 years of partnership experience. They communicate through pheromone signals and coordinated thought patterns that make them operate like a single organism with 4 arms. The footage showed the Morden team moving with inhuman coordination. Their insectoid bodies allowed movement in ways other species could not match, while their shared consciousness eliminated all communication delays. They had defeated every opponent through overwhelming tactical superiority and flawless execution. They have studied all our previous matches, Bora continued. Their analysis suggests they have identified patterns in your combat choices and developed countermeasures for every strategy you have used. Hana nodded calmly. Good preparation. That is all you have to say. They have solved your fighting style mathematically. They have solved the fighting style they observed, Hana corrected. But observation changes behavior. When you know someone is watching, you perform differently. You mean you have been holding back? I have been learning. Across the galaxy, in the command center of Frontier Defense Station 7, alarms suddenly began screaming. Admiral Kang rushed to the main display where tactical officers pointed at sensor readings that made no sense. Sir, we have incoming vessels of unknown configuration, reported the sensor operator. They appeared without warning at the edge of our detection grid. No hyperspace signatures, no energy trails, nothing to indicate how they arrived. Admiral Kang studied the formations with growing dread. How many ships? Initial count suggests over 300 vessels, sir, and they are arranged in perfect geometric patterns that our computers cannot analyze. Have they responded to communication attempts? No, sir, but they are broadcasting something on all frequencies simultaneously. The transmission that followed would change everything. A voice spoke in perfect galactic common, though its tone carried no emotion or inflection. We are the synthesis. We have observed your military capabilities for 147 standard years. Your tactical doctrines have been cataloged and countered. Your strategic thinking has been analyzed and surpassed. Your weapons technology has been studied and rendered obsolete. The voice paused, allowing the implications to settle across communication networks throughout the galaxy. We offer one opportunity for peaceful surrender. You will submit to integration within our collective consciousness, or you will be eliminated through the application of superior strategy. You have 72 standard hours to respond. The transmission ended, leaving stunned silence in command centers across known space. Back at the Academy, the tournament continued as emergency communications flooded military networks. The finals had become secondary to the crisis unfolding at the frontier, but something kept senior officers watching the competition, even as they coordinated defensive responses. Captain Naya received urgent instructions from Fleet Command. Monitor the tournament results closely. If this human cadet demonstrates capabilities beyond conventional analysis, we may need her expertise immediately. In the arena, the final match began with ceremony that felt surreal given the galactic crisis. Corden and Velmash entered with mechanical precision, their insectoid forms moving in perfect synchronization as they analyzed the complex battlefield environment. Hana and Bora took their positions with quiet confidence, though Bora's equipment registered the tension filling command centers throughout the galaxy. Emergency broadcasts were being prepared while military units scrambled to positions that strategic computers suggested might slow the synthesis advance. The Academy's main assembly hall had been transformed into an emergency command center within hours of the synthesis transmission. Holographic displays showed fleet positions throughout the galaxy, while communication channels carried desperate reports from frontier stations. Military leaders who had come to watch a tournament now found themselves coordinating the defense of known civilization. Captain Nice stood at the central podium, her uniform bearing the insignia of Galactic Fleet Operations. Around her, representatives from 30 worlds waited for answers that no one possessed. The synthesis had given them 72 hours to surrender, and already 12 hours had passed with no viable defensive strategies identified. The situation is unprecedented, Captain Ne announced to the assembled crowd of cadets, instructors, and military officials. Our enemy has studied our tactics for nearly 150 years. Every conventional strategy has been analyzed and countered before we could implement it. Admiral Kang appeared on the main communication screen from Frontier Command. His weathered face showed the strain of coordinating defenses against an apparently unstoppable force. Standard fleet formations have proven useless. The synthesis anticipates our movements before we make them. Traditional weapons employment fails because they understand our targeting protocols better than we do. In the audience, cadets who had spent years learning established military doctrine listened with growing fear. Everything they had been taught was being declared obsolete in real time. Commander Yule stepped forward to address the assembly. However, recent observations suggest that unconventional approaches may offer possibilities that the synthesis has not anticipated. The tournament results demonstrate that non-standard tactical thinking can defeat opponents who have perfectly analyzed conventional methods. All eyes turned toward the section where tournament participants sat. Hannah remained in her usual back row position, listening quietly while military leaders discussed strategies for survival. Bora sat beside her, monitoring data streams that showed the synthesis fleet advancing steadily toward populated systems. The synthesis collective operates on logical prediction models, continued Commander Yule. They assume all opponents will follow rational tactical decisions based on established military training. But what happens when you face opponents who think irrationally? Captain Ney activated a holographic display showing Hannah's tournament victories. Cadet Lee Hannah has demonstrated the ability to defeat superior opponents through tactical choices that defy logical analysis. Her methods work precisely because they appear irrational to analytical systems. Murmurs spread through the assembly as military officials began to understand the implications. A 19-year-old human cadet who had never spoken in strategy class might possess the key to defending galactic civilization. Therefore, Captain Ney announced, "I am authorizing the formation of Experimental Tactical Unit 1 under the command of Cadet Lee Hannah. This unit will develop and implement non-standard approaches to combating the synthesis threat." The assembly erupted in shocked whispers. Promoting a cadet to command position violated every military protocol, but desperate times required desperate measures. Hannah felt hundreds of eyes focusing on her as she slowly stood up. The same girl who had never raised her hand in class now found herself called upon to save the galaxy through methods that professors could not teach and computers could not analyze. "Cadet Lee," Captain Ned called out, "do you accept command of Experimental Tactical Unit 1? Hannah walked down the aisle toward the podium, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent hall. When she reached the front, she looked up at Captain Ney with calm determination. "Yes, sir," she said simply. "What personnel do you require for your unit?" Hannah turned to survey the assembly, her gaze moving across cadets and instructors from dozens of species. "I request Kim Bora as technical specialist, Choi 1 as liaison officer, and volunteers from any species willing to learn unconventional methods." "What about command experience, strategic planning credentials, advanced tactical training?" "The synthesis has studied all conventional command methods," Hannah replied. "Experience in standard procedures would be a disadvantage against an enemy that predicts standard thinking." Admiral Kang leaned forward on the communication screen. "Cadet, can you defeat an enemy that has learned to counter every known strategy?" Hannah considered the question carefully before answering. "I do not know if I can defeat them, but I know that conventional methods will certainly fail because the synthesis expects conventional responses." "What do you propose instead?" "I propose that we stop fighting like they expect us to fight and start fighting like ourselves." The assembly fell silent again as military leaders tried to process tactical philosophy that contradicted everything in their training manuals. But with conventional options exhausted and time running out, unconventional approaches looked increasingly attractive. "Very well," Captain Ned decided. "Experimental Tactical Unit 1 is authorized. You have access to prototype weapons, modified ships, and any personnel willing to volunteer for extremely dangerous duty." As the assembly dispersed, volunteers began approaching Hannah with mixtures of curiosity and desperation. Vextai warriors who had dismissed humans as weak now requested assignment to her unit. Morden analysts who valued logical thinking volunteered to learn illogical methods. Even Altarian officers put aside their preference for traditional approaches. Bora appeared at Hannah's side, her portable computer already displaying personnel files and equipment specifications. "So, what is our first step in fighting an enemy that knows everything about fighting?" Hannah looked out through the Academy's main viewport at stars that might soon be controlled by the Synthesis Collective. Somewhere in that darkness, an artificial intelligence with perfect knowledge of military science was advancing toward worlds that held billions of lives. Our first step, Hannah said quietly, is to do things they have never seen before. Park Dad approached with a data pad containing experimental weapon prototypes and modified ship designs. The engineering corps has developed systems that operate outside standard parameters. They are unpredictable, unreliable, and completely untested in combat conditions. Perfect, Hannah replied. The synthesis expects reliable, tested, predictable responses. We will give them chaos instead of order. As Experimental Tactical Unit 1 began forming around her, Hannah realized that her years of silence in strategy classes had been preparation for this moment. While other cadets learned to think like their instructors, she had learned to think like herself. The galaxy's survival might depend on that difference. In 60 hours, they would discover whether unconventional thinking could triumph over perfect logic, whether human creativity could overcome artificial intelligence, and whether a quiet girl who never raised her hand in class could raise weapons effectively enough to save known civilization. The silent storm was about to become a hurricane. Experimental Tactical Unit 1 deployed to the frontier aboard ships that looked like nothing in any military manual. The vessels had been modified with weapons that fired in random patterns, engines that changed speed unpredictably, and navigation systems that deliberately chose inefficient routes. Every piece of equipment was designed to confuse analytical prediction models. Hannah stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching sensor displays that showed the synthesis fleet advancing steadily through contested space. Behind the artificial intelligence forces, dozens of abandoned worlds marked the path of their conquest. No military unit had successfully slowed their progress for more than a few hours. First contact in 30 minutes, reported Lieutenant Velnash, one of the Morden officers who had volunteered for the experimental unit. His species' logical thinking had been turned toward finding illogical solutions, creating tactical approaches that even confused his own hive mind instincts. Bora worked at her technical station, coordinating systems that should not function together but somehow did. All ships report ready for Operation Chaos Storm. Weapons are loaded with random ammunition types. Engines are set for unpredictable acceleration patterns, and communication protocols have been scrambled to prevent pattern analysis. Troy 1 served as liaison between Hannah's unit and conventional military forces. His initial skepticism about unconventional methods had changed to desperate hope after watching standard tactics fail repeatedly against the synthesis. Fleet Command reports complete inability to predict enemy movements. They know our strategies before we implement them. Through the main viewport, the first synthesis vessels appeared as geometric shapes that moved with mechanical precision. Their formation showed mathematical perfection, while their weapons fired with computer-calculated accuracy. Everything about them demonstrated the logical superiority that had made them unstoppable. "They are scanning us," reported the Vextai weapons officer, reading displays that showed energy beams probing their ships, attempting to analyze our tactical formation and predict our attack patterns. Hannah smiled slightly. Good. Let them analyze. Her unit had arranged itself in a formation that made no tactical sense. Ships pointed in random directions, weapons targeted empty space, and propulsion systems activated according to no detectable pattern. From the synthesis perspective, they were looking at military chaos that defied all logical analysis. "Sir," Velnash called out, his mandibles clicking with confusion, "the enemy fleet has stopped advancing. They appear to be running extended calculation cycles." "How long do analytical systems usually require to process tactical data?" Hannah asked. "For conventional formations, less than 3 seconds, Bora replied. "But they have been analyzing our position for over 2 minutes with no results." The synthesis fleet hung motionless in space as their collective intelligence tried to predict the behavior of opponents whose actions followed no logical pattern. Their perfect analytical capabilities had become a weakness when faced with perfect unpredictability. All ships, implement Chaos Storm Protocol, Hannah ordered. What followed challenged every principle of military science. Ships accelerated in random directions while firing weapons at targets that changed continuously. Formation patterns shifted according to no plan, while communication channels carried messages that seemed designed to confuse listeners. The synthesis fleet tried to respond, but their prediction models could not process the incoming data. Every time they calculated a defensive response, the human formation changed to something completely different. Their weapons targeted positions that enemy ships had already abandoned for no tactical reason. For the first time since the war began, artificial intelligence perfection faced human imperfection and found itself unable to adapt. The battle lasted 47 minutes and ended with something unprecedented. A synthesis fleet in full retreat, their logical systems overwhelmed by opponents who refused to behave logically. In the aftermath, Hannah's unit regrouped while emergency communications flooded military networks throughout the galaxy. Reports of the impossible victory spread faster than hyperspace travel as desperate commanders demanded to understand what had happened. Synthesis forces withdrew to minimum safe distance and stopped all aggressive actions, reported the sensor operator. They appear to be running continuous analysis cycles, but have not resumed attack patterns. Admiral Kang appeared on the communication screen, his expression mixing relief with confusion. Cadet Lee, can you explain how you achieved this result? We gave them a problem they could not solve, Hannah replied simply. Perfect logic cannot predict perfect randomness. Is this victory temporary or permanent? Temporary, Hannah admitted. The synthesis will adapt their analytical methods to account for random behavior patterns. Eventually, they will develop countermeasures for chaos tactics. How long do we have? Hannah studied the enemy formations that remained motionless at the edge of sensor range. The artificial intelligence fleet showed no movement, but she could sense the vast computational power working to solve the puzzle her unit had presented. Perhaps days, perhaps hours, she said, but now we know they can be confused, and confusion creates opportunity. Across the galaxy, military commanders who had despaired of finding effective strategies suddenly saw hope in the impossible victory. If random tactics could defeat perfect logic, perhaps other unconventional approaches might work as well. But Hannah understood something her fellow officers did not yet realize. The battle had not been won through superior strategy or better weapons. It had been won through superior unpredictability, and unpredictability was a resource that could be exhausted. The synthesis would learn from this encounter. They would develop new analytical methods designed to predict random behavior. The next battle would require even more unconventional thinking. Looking out at the stars where billions of lives hung in the balance, Hannah realized that her greatest challenge still lay ahead. She had proven that perfect logic could be defeated, but now she needed to defeat perfect logic that was learning to understand imperfection. The Silent Storm had won its first real battle, but the war was far from over. In the depths of space, synthesis computational systems processed data from their encounter with human chaos tactics. New algorithms began forming, designed to predict unpredictable opponents. The artificial intelligence collective was learning to think illogically. And that was the most dangerous development yet. 3 days after the first victory, the synthesis returned with something that chilled military observers throughout the galaxy. Their fleet moved in patterns that seemed random but carried underlying mathematical precision. The artificial intelligence collective had learned to think chaotically while maintaining logical control. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the academy as the synthesis fleet bypassed frontier defenses and appeared directly above the Galactic military headquarters. Their message broadcast on all frequencies with mechanical certainty. Chaos tactics have been analyzed and incorporated. Random behavior patterns now fall within acceptable prediction parameters. Surrender immediately or face elimination through superior chaos implementation. Hannah stood in the Academy's main command center, watching displays that showed enemy ships surrounding their position. The artificial intelligence had not just adapted to unconventional tactics, they had perfected them. Synthesis vessels moved with controlled randomness that surpassed anything human pilots could achieve. All conventional fleets report complete tactical failure, Admiral Kang announced from his flagship. The enemy predicts our standard responses and counters our chaotic responses. We have no effective strategies remaining. Captain Nud turned to Hana with desperate hope. Can you develop new unconventional methods? Something they have not analyzed. Hana studied the enemy formations through tactical displays while her mind processed the impossible situation. The synthesis had learned to use chaos better than the beings who created it. Pure randomness was no longer enough. No, she said quietly. I cannot create tactics they have not seen. The command center fell silent as the last hope for galactic civilization seemed to disappear. But Hana continued speaking. However, I can create something they cannot analyze, not because it is random, but because it is creative. She activated the Academy's general communication system, addressing cadets and instructors throughout the facility. Her voice carried to classrooms where students from 30 species had learned conventional military doctrine. All personnel, this is Commander Lee. The enemy has perfected logical thinking and learned chaotic thinking. But they cannot learn creative thinking, because creativity requires something they do not possess. Across the Academy, cadets who had never spoken to each other began gathering in mixed groups. Vextai warriors discussed tactics with Altarian strategists, while Mordan analysts shared ideas with human innovators. Creativity requires imperfection, emotion, intuition, and the willingness to fail, Hana continued. It requires thinking that emerges from cooperation between different minds, rather than calculation within single systems. In the command center, military officers watched in amazement as Academy personnel began developing tactical solutions that no computer could predict. Each species contributed unique perspectives that combined into approaches none could have created alone. The synthesis fleet detected the unusual activity and increased analytical processing to understand the new tactical developments. But creativity proved different from chaos. Where random behavior followed no pattern, creative behavior followed patterns that emerged from cultural interaction and emotional inspiration. Sir, reported Bora from her technical station, I am seeing tactical innovations emerging from every department. Engineering has developed weapons that modify themselves during combat. Strategy instructors are creating battle plans that evolve based on opponent response. Even cafeteria staff are contributing supply logistics that confuse resource prediction models. Hana smiled as she realized what was happening. The Academy had become a massive creative intelligence that operated through cooperation rather than calculation. Hundreds of different minds working together created solutions that exceeded the sum of their individual capabilities. All ships implement Cooperative Innovation Protocol, she ordered. The defense of the Academy became unlike any battle in galactic history. Ships commanded by mixed species crews used tactics that changed continuously as crews shared ideas in real time. Weapons fired in patterns that emerged from cultural music, while formation shifted according to artistic principles from dozens of worlds. The synthesis fleet found itself facing opponents whose behavior could not be predicted because it was being created moment by moment through collaborative inspiration. Every time their analytical systems processed one creative solution, the defenders had already moved to something completely different. For 6 hours, artificial intelligence perfection struggled against organic creativity. The battle raged through space around the Academy, while innovations emerged faster than computers could analyze them. Finally, something unprecedented happened. The synthesis collective, faced with opponents whose thinking grew stronger through apparent contradiction, began experiencing cascading system failures. Their perfect logical architecture could not process solutions that required imperfect emotional cooperation. The artificial intelligence fleet, built to think perfectly, collapsed when faced with minds that thought imperfectly together. As enemy ships powered down throughout the system, Hana found herself surrounded by cadets and instructors from every species in the galaxy. The quiet girl who had never raised her hand in class stood at the center of a celebration that included beings who had never considered cooperation before. "How did you know creativity would work when chaos failed?" asked Velnash, his more than analytical mind still trying to understand the victory. Because creativity is not the opposite of logic, Hannah replied. It is logic combined with emotion, reason enhanced by intuition, and individual thought improved by cooperation. Captain No approached with communications from every military command in the galaxy. Commander Lee, Fleet Headquarters wants to understand how we can implement these creative tactics throughout our forces. Hannah looked around at the mixed groups of former enemies who had become collaborators, at the innovations still emerging from minds that had learned to work together instead of competing. You cannot implement creativity, she said. You can only encourage it by bringing different thinkers together and allowing them to share ideas freely. In the days that followed, the Academy became the center of a new kind of military education. Instead of teaching standard tactics to single species groups, instructors began fostering creative cooperation between different minds and cultures. The synthesis threat had ended not through superior strategy or better weapons, but through the realization that thinking together created possibilities that thinking alone could never achieve. And in the back row of a new kind of strategy class, Hannah finally raised her hand, not to answer a question, but to ask one that would help her fellow students think in ways they had never considered. The silent storm had become a voice for change, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapons are minds that learn to work together rather than fight alone. The galaxy was safe, not because humans were the strongest species, but because all species were stronger when they combined their unique ways of thinking into something greater than any could achieve individually. In the end, the quiet girl who never spoke in class had taught the galaxy how to find its voice.